Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out to our 2024 ACE candidate debate series. This is our school board debate run by ACE, which stands for the Activism and Civic Engagement Club. We're a nonpartisan high school club at Merrimack High School. If you're interested, our town council debate will be on April 3rd at 6:30, same room, the Matthew Thornton room. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce our student moderators. Tonight we have Cadence, who's co-moderating, and then Nathan, who will be our timekeeper tonight. And now I will introduce the candidates, starting with school board members Jenna Hardy, Lori Peters, and budget committee member Heather Robitaille. Emily Rocher-Booten was unable to attend tonight, and Anthony Santoriello declined her invitation. So we will now start with opening statements, starting with Jenna.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here tonight. I'm so excited because I think the last time I ran, there was COVID was still a factor, and I don't think you did these, at least not when I ran. So I'm very excited to be here tonight. Thank you for hosting and all the preparation that's gone into this night. For those of you at home, my name is Jenna Hardy. I am currently a member of the Merrimack School Board. But for anyone who doesn't happen to know about me, I was raised and educated here in Merrimack. I'm a public school teacher currently with my master's degree in education. My husband and I did decide to settle here. We have 4 children who are also being educated right here in Merrimack. And I have spent the last 3 years on the school board. I've really enjoyed my time on the school board. It's been challenging. It's been rewarding, and I'm really proud of some of the changes that we have made to help improve educational and student outcomes, and I'm really looking forward to talk about that some more tonight.
Perfect. Thank you. Lori?
Good evening. I'm Lori Peters, and I too have been on the school board for the last 3 years. Thank you again for doing this. This is wonderful to see high school students actively involved in what's happening in our community and in local politics. So I appreciate all that the students have done. 3 years ago when I came on the board, it was a time of transition. The week before I was elected, the governor had ordered all schools back to in-person learning. The superintendent had submitted his resignation, and nobody knew what the next school year was going to look like. And this school board that I was a part of transitioned our central office team, mitigated COVID policies to be in-person, face-to-face learning the next year. We advocated for phonics learning and going back and returning to all 3 of our elementary schools to phonemic awareness and the science of reading, moving towards a curriculum that would do that, advocating for an improved math curriculum because we recognized even before COVID that our testing scores needed to improve. And so we advocated for curriculum changes to make that happen. We have kept our budgets below inflation. We've successfully negotiated our MTA and MESA contracts that have made Merrimack competitive for our employees to be an employer of choice with comparable districts. And that is a benefit to our students, and I'm proud of those negotiations so that our students can have the very best. This school board, and it has been such a joy, even though we all have different backgrounds, different thinking, we meet for setting goals each summer, and those goals drive our agendas and drive our mission every year. My family has lived in Merrimack since 2013, although I worked here prior to that. And we love this town. And we love everything about Merrimack. It is the most wonderful town in New Hampshire, I have to say. And I am proud to be a part of such an amazing, unified community.
Thank you. And lastly, Heather.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for being here. Thank you for arranging all of this. I definitely appreciate everything that the ACE Club has done. I think it's a great example of our students' engagement in our community. So thank you, Matthew, Cadence, and Nathan. For those of you at home, my name is Heather Robitaille. I've lived here for just over 20 years. I live here with my husband and our daughter, Katie, who attends school at Thornton's Ferry. Since I was younger, I've been really passionate about helping kids and working with kids. I spent about 15 years as a martial arts instructor, volunteering to work and teach with children. And it wasn't just teaching them self-defense, it was teaching them discipline and leadership, confidence, and teamwork. And then once my daughter was in school, I had an opportunity to serve on the board at the Merrimack PTA Kindergarten and Preschool, which is now the home of the Merrimack Historical Society. And I had a lot of fun, and I felt a lot of fulfillment being involved on that board. From there, now that she's at Thornton's Ferry, I've been, I joke, a professional volunteer in the school district, and I'm serving my second year as the president of the parent-teacher organization there. I've also been a volunteer for Girl Scouts, and I'm coaching the Girls on the Run program. So passion for helping children succeed and develop has been something that I've carried with me my entire life. As a professional, I spent nearly 10 years in finance working at Fidelity Investments here in Merrimack, where I developed financial knowledge as well as teamwork and leadership skills as a senior manager. Right now, I am serving on the budget committee. I've been active in our school board meetings, attending. I'm a familiar face and public comment, as well as deliberative session, where I made an amendment to keep political agendas out of our school curriculum. And I believe that I would bring diversity to the board as someone that is not a professional educator, and I would love to have a chance to share my voice as a voice for our students and our schools and our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
On April 1st, a public hearing will be held. That's on. On April 1st, a public hearing will be held to consider the purchase of Wit and Wisdom to help improve student outcomes. Do you support this effort? What other ways can we improve student outcomes? Lori Peters.
Before I address the actual curriculum of Wit and Wisdom, I would like to clarify one thing. That public hearing is on how we are buying Wit and Wisdom. The decision to buy Wit and Wisdom has already been made. It has gone through the rigorous process with our central office team, with the curriculum committee, with teachers, and has been piloted in a number of classrooms. This hearing is about using retained funds that the Merrimack voters approved last year for the district to hold, and use those funds rather than budgetary funds for the purchase of Wit and Wisdom. That being said, I have looked at every module of every grade of Wit and Wisdom, and I am extremely pleased with its curriculum. The curriculum spans both nonfiction and fiction literature. It goes hand in hand with the science of reading, increasing literacy and fluency, reading comprehension for our students. It connects our students to real pieces of history. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Wit and Wisdom is that they are politically neutral and worldview neutral. They, in their nonfiction works, state the facts. For example, in the civil rights unit in one of the lower grades, some of the books for that civil rights unit include Ruby Bridges Goes to School, and it is a simple reader about her story for kids to read. Martin Luther King Jr. and the March on Washington, which even my children have read. The Story of Ruby Bridges, and Separate is Never Equal. While these are told from their stories, they are factual and historical. And I really appreciate that about the nonfiction works within the curriculum. The fictional works span everything from mythology to short stories to poetry, and expose the children to a great deal of challenging reading. And the other reason I support it is because Wit and Wisdom gets rid of the idea of leveling and raises children to meet their full potential by challenging them to read at or above grade level. So I do support the purchase of Wit and Wisdom for our curriculum.
Thank you, Lori. Heather Robitaille.
Hi, thank you. So yes, I also support the purchase of Wit and Wisdom. It's not a random purchase that has been made, as Lori just mentioned. It's the final purchase in the Wilson products that are all aligned in the same scope and sequence. And this program completes the set. And it will provide consistency across our elementary schools, which will help students as they all move up to the upper elementary school. Previously, in our 3 elementary schools, they all had different literacy programs at one point that were not consistent. And now this will align with the science of reading, and it will help them the way that we now truly understand how children learn to read. It's a cumulative program, and it builds on itself as it introduces new concepts. And as Lori mentioned, it's not just a reader, it gives you enrichment. So it teaches topics such as famous artwork and history, on social skills, like how to debate, making eye contact, how to disagree constructively, and how to let others share a difference of opinion, which are skills that everyone needs in life. So this, adding on to the literacy components that we already have in place with Hegarty and Foundation, Spelling Connections, and Membean, helps set up our students for success.
Thank you, Heather. Jenna Hardy.
Okay, so in the opposite of a spirit of debate, I would agree with everything both of those two candidates just said. So I'm going to, first of all, agree with everything they just said, especially what Lori said, that the bond hearing is about how we're going to pay for it, not about whether we are going to, if this is what we're going forward with. It's been, as both of them said, a long-term, planned out transition into the science of reading. The one thing I will say, because they've said many of the things that I was going to say, what I want to say is that Wit and Wisdom is recognized by the Knowledge Matters campaign, and it's one of only 6 knowledge-building curricula that is designed specifically to build background knowledge for students. In elementary school, there's very little time for science and social studies because we're focused on building foundational math and reading skills and writing skills. So to have a program that through the learning of reading, writing, you're also gaining background knowledge in many different topics in science and social studies is incredibly important. I just wanted to mention that the Knowledge Matters campaign offers 5 essential features of knowledge-rich curriculum. One of them is that it is specific. The content they are learning is very specific, and it's clearly stated throughout the topic. Second, it's cumulative. There's depth and it's breadth, and it builds on each other across the grades. It's well-rounded, which, as Heather mentioned, they draw from science and history, the arts, geography, all different areas. It's not just one subject area or focused on one thing. It's preparatory, which is it looks ahead to what students will learn in further grades, so it can provide them the background knowledge necessary to be successful in those grades. And it's rigorous. And as Lori mentioned, that is something I think we need to move towards. I think it's oftentimes in education we try to make kids feel comfortable, and we should do that, but we also need to raise the bar and tell them, you can do this. This is hard, and you can do this, and help them and support them as they push through in their learning, which helps them develop that grit that everybody needs to succeed. So yes, I'm 100% supportive of Wit and Wisdom.
Thank you, Jenna. How long have you lived in Merrimack? Jenna Hardy.
Well, I think we moved here when I was 4. I went to college someplace else in Ohio. I lived elsewhere for a little bit of time, and then I moved back here when I had my first child. So I think at this point I qualify as a townie.
Lori Peters.
We lived here briefly in 2005 when my husband was short-term stationed here for a job. Then we moved back to Colorado, came back to New Hampshire, and I worked and worshiped in Merrimack from 2009, and then in 2013 we purchased our home.
Heather Robitaille.
I've lived here since I was able to buy my first home after I graduated college, and so it's been just over 20 years now.
Have you or a child been a student in the Merrimack School District? Heather Robitaille.
My daughter, yes, she attends Thornton's Ferry School here in Merrimack.
Thank you. Ms. Peters.
My oldest son, Brandon, attended Merrimack High School, and we lived here in 2005.
Jenna Hardy.
Yes, I was a student in Merrimack, and I went to Reed's Ferry School when Marge Shaffrey was the principal and Frank Hoyle was the assistant principal. And yes, all 4 of my children have been educated in Merrimack. I have a 2021 graduate who is in college in Kentucky. I have a senior at Merrimack High School, a junior at Merrimack High School, and a 5th grader at JMUS.
Great, thank you so much. Just to help us move forward, when you passed a minute, I'll just tap on the table. Just try to close up your thoughts, but there will be no limit to your time. Okay, starting with Ms. Robitaille. Why are you running for school board, and what do you want to see changed?
I only have a minute.
You can take up to 2 minutes. Just just as a measure of your time. I'll let you know when you have a minute.
Okay, thank you. So I'm running for school board because I would like to bring my unique perspectives and experience to the board. I've seen a lot of progress be made, and I am proud of what we've done. I also feel like there are some opportunities that we can continue to improve on. Really quickly, I'll say community collaboration and communication. I would like to see input solicited more from key stakeholders, having questions and dialogue during meetings. I'd like to focus on high school graduation rates. I think components of that are continuing to focus on literacy and early intervention. Improving our reading scores will improve math scores. I think as well we need to look at student support. So we understand that students don't just drop out when they get to high school, they become disengaged earlier, and I think we need a formal method to track that and identify and give them a connection and a reason to feel that they have someone at our schools that wants them to succeed. Because unfortunately, not everyone has that at home. I'd also like to make sure that we're ensuring all of our special education students are receiving the supports that they need to be successful. And I would also like to focus on the budget. I think it's important, we've heard from our community that taxes, and in our state right now, taxes, a lot of that comes from the way we fund education. And I'd like to find a balance with that, preferably on ways that don't have direct and negative impacts to student programs and curricula.
Thank you. Jenna Hardy.
I'm running for the school board. Well, first of all, I'm on the school board right now, so I'm running for re-election. And honestly, I feel like I've just got my feet under me and understanding so much of the policy, the procedures, how things work. I felt like I really knew the Merrimack School District, having 4 kids, when I started. And I feel like I've learned so much and grown so much. I would really like, I'm very proud of the progress we've made this year, especially with the transformation of our reading programs in K-6 through the science of reading. And I think we've done a lot of work at the elementary school, and I think we still have a lot of work to do building upon that at Merrimack Middle School and Merrimack High School. I'd like to see dual enrollment programming expanded so that we can help our students gain college credit while they're still in high school to help make college affordable. I think I'd like to see some work at the guidance department at Merrimack High School. As a parent of 3 high school students, I hear a lot that the guidance department doesn't always help meet students' needs and support students in the way that I think a lot of kids would prefer. I agree with Heather about the graduation rate, and in general, I would like to see improved student outcomes across the district, which is something we've been working hard at as a board, and I would like to be part of that continued work.
Thank you. Ms. Peters.
Much of what Jenna and Heather said, I agree with, and that's why we're running for school board and why I'm running for re-election. I agree. Much of what we had to do the first year I was on the board was all COVID related. We are past all of that as far as policies and consuming much of our board meetings. And now I feel like we really have momentum moving forward in curriculum, student outcomes, improving test scores, seeing a return of investment. But that takes years. It doesn't just happen in a year or two. And for that reason, I want to continue the work that we are moving towards rather than making decisions to shortchange that. We are going to be facing a transition of superintendent. We hired Mr. Olson to be an interim. And so that transition is coming, and I want to be a part of that transition, knowing all the stakeholders, knowing the work that we have done on the portrait of a graduate, portrait of a learner, and the strategic plan. I would like to see that strategic plan through. That strategic plan using 23 members from all over our community is so critical to the future of the district. I would also like to build upon what we've been doing at the elementary and begin to expand that at the middle school and high school levels. I agree that we need to expand dual credit opportunities. My son was able to, through NHTI, graduate with 61 hours of dual credit. And I would like to see those opportunities at the high school. I also believe that that will help with our graduation outcomes because it opens more doors for students who may want to do something a little different along with our ELOs, along with our alternative graduation pathways. So I would like to see the work we're moving towards continue in that. I would also like to support our students, as they move out of the elementary, we have amazing assessment tools through iReady to individualize and differentiate instruction. And I'd like to see that continue, because you really start to become your own person when you hit those teen years. And so really being able to support each student individually, I think, is very important.
Thank you. On Election Day, voters may decide to authorize a new SAU building. Do you support the construction of this building? Additionally, do you support the new proposal, which was presented at the deliberative session, or the original proposal, which clocked in at around $6.9 million? And for this, we will start with Lori Peters.
I did support the original proposed SAU building. I think there is an advantage to having all of those important administrators and their support staff in one place, especially because a lot of collaboration doesn't happen with official meetings. And being able to walk across the hall, grab a couple of people in the office and be able to discuss an issue right then and there is so effective. But I also appreciate the input from our voters, that they were not comfortable with the existing plan and with the existing budget. And so that is why I supported at the deliberative session and last Monday night at our board meeting the new plan, which reduces it down to $4.8 million. It gets most of the people that we want in there and the support staff. It updates the facility so it's safe, clean, and a healthy environment. It's ADA compliant. And it really is a place where new hires and new potential hires can come and see that we as a town support our staff and our teachers. That this is a place where we care about one another. And we communicate that with having a building like this.
Thank you. Ms. Robitaille.
Thank you. I would definitely say that all of our staff at our school district deserves to have a safe and functional working environment. I did have an opportunity to go tour the building when Lori Rothaus was offering tours, and I think for those of us who saw, hi Lori, the video too at deliberative session, these are not ideal conditions, and they're not in many ways appropriate for what we're doing as a business and as a school district. So I definitely think we need a new building. I actually did abstain from my vote when the budget committee had to take their vote after deliberative session. I respect and appreciate that the board heard from the community and came up with a plan that was less. I don't feel like at this point I have enough information to tell you specifically. But that is something that I know the board has been working to put more information out, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Ms. Hardy.
So I echo everything Lori said as well. I know that makes for a boring, again, debate, but here we are. I supported the original proposal for exactly the reasons that Lori said. Working in a school district, I see every day how that collaboration happens while people are in the hallway and grabbing somebody for a quick, hey, I need to know this opinion. So having everybody in one place. I'm also in favor of spending money to build for the future so that we never have to be, in a few years and, things grow and then all of a sudden you need to put a giant addition on a building because you built one that wasn't sufficient. I want to build the building that is appropriate. I want to have a central office that is safe, that is accessible, that I can feel proud of putting employees in. The fact sometimes that when I think about the employees we're asking to work in this building, in this basement, or if somebody who had a disability came and wanted to work in our HR department, it's in the basement with no accessibility. That's embarrassing and shameful, quite frankly. So yes, I was supportive of the original proposal. However, I am proud of the fact that the board listened to the feedback from the community and that we pivoted and we adjusted and we put something out that could allow us to meet our goals while also helping to make it more palatable for the community to say yes to.
Thank you.
Recently, the New Hampshire House of Representatives voted in support of the expansion of education freedom accounts. What is your position on this legislation, starting with Jenna Hardy?
Okay. I am not in favor of education freedom accounts because I am not in favor of anything that takes public tax dollars away from public schools. And when we talk about the tax burden on constituents in our town, you know, I don't think that doing anything that makes that burden greater in favor of individuals is something that it's just not what I'm in favor of.
Thank you. Lori Peters?
Well, this is an area where Jen and I do disagree, and yet we get a lot accomplished on the board. This is one of the things I've appreciated about our board. I do support the education freedom accounts. I believe that public schools should manage their budgets based on the students they have and not the students who are not in the district. However, I also believe that as a state, we need to find a better way to fund our public school system than putting that burden primarily on residential and business tax, property tax. I've lived in a lot of different states where that is not a problem. And I think that burden is very, very high here. In fact, right prior to my parents moving here 2 years ago, in Colorado, their property tax on a very large home, their state income tax and their sales tax was lower than what I pay in property tax here in New Hampshire. And yet they don't have a funding problem in the state of Colorado for public education. So I think I don't have the solution. This is why we vote for our state reps and our state senators. But I do believe as a state we need to look for better ways, especially for smaller towns who are struggling to fund public education. That being said, I also believe families should not be limited in finding the best educational option for their children. And in doing that, I believe that we can make Merrimack so competitive that people want to spend their EFA dollars here.
Thank you. Heather, oh my gosh. Heather Robitaille.
Hi, I do not support education freedom accounts. I realize it sounds counterintuitive to say you don't support something that has the word freedom in it. However, these were designed for students, for families that had a lower income, that maybe were in a district that was underperforming, to have other opportunities for their education. I fully support families finding the best environment and education for their student, for their children, and that is different for each individual. However, what we are seeing is that 75% of those who are receiving the funds from these education freedom accounts were already enrolled in private schools or homeschooled. If you look at the reporting, the program has been astronomically over budget and has very little oversight on how these funds are being spent. You can look at reports, and it's not all being funded towards things that you would associate with an education. Our state reps did just recently vote to increase the eligibility to be over 300% of poverty, and it might even be higher. But what that does in the state of New Hampshire, whether you support them or not, if you are concerned as a taxpayer about how much of your money needs to go to school, that is that much less money coming from the state to fund our schools. And if you take 10 kids out of a school and they're in different classes, you still have to fund the electricity bills, the staff, and everything like that. So it is not an equitable trade, and I don't support taking public tax dollars out of our public schools.
Thank you. Could you explain a competency-based education system in your eyes and what the advantages and disadvantages of this system are? Starting with Lori Peters.
So competency-based education ensures that a student obtains not just a grade, but skills. And those skills are based on a decision-making team for each subject area. I have seen it done well, and I've seen it done poorly. In the case of the poorly side, my son was an example of this. He was in a competency-based piloting program, and in his Spanish class, they only had one opportunity for the competency of writing. Because he did not pass that one opportunity in a semester, he was given an F for the semester, despite his grade being an 89. That is competencies not done well. That is not what we are proposing here in Merrimack. Competency-based education works together to ensure kids have skills, and they've learned, and they have a grade. Now, I don't agree with all of my board member peers, but I believe in a hybrid system for our high school students where we have competency-based education, but they also receive a grade so they can be competitive for scholarships and admission to colleges that are still using the traditional GPA system.
Thank you. Ms. Robitaille.
So I think the benefits of having a competency-based system, when of course done well and done correctly, is it allows us to measure skills versus things outside like homework, which not every student has a supportive and welcoming functional environment to do those types of things outside of school. I think the benefit is that it allows students and teachers to be supported in specific measurable ways, so that if a student had an A in English, you might not know what they needed help with, just like if they had a C. Maybe it's their writing, maybe it was spelling, but this breaks things down. And as a parent, I appreciate being able to see what skills my child needs to improve on and where they are also excelling so they can be supported. I think we need to know what we want students to learn and how to get them there. And by looking at skills that are measurable and trackable, it allows us to do that. I do think in high school, we have to be mindful of the competition that there is from a scholarship and merit-based standpoint. So I don't have a direct answer for that piece of it, but it's something that we would certainly need to look into to make sure we're doing the best to support our children from an educational standpoint, and then also set them up for success for whatever their plans are once they graduate from Merrimack High School.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy.
So I'm a K-8 educator. I do not pretend to be an expert in competency-based grading. However, what I have learned about it, I've learned from my board colleagues. Lori Rothaus especially talks about it all the time. So a lot of what I've learned from her and from Lori, and Lori Peters, both Loris. And what I've learned a lot, and what I hear Lori Rothaus saying all the time that I completely agree with. She gives the example of a student who maybe fails a class, but if you go back and you check off the competencies that student has performed over the course of that year, you might find that out of, and see, this is where my knowledge is going to fail me because I don't even know how many competencies in a year, but let's say there's 10. So 10 competencies, let's say the student hit, 6 and they failed, but they need their grade was a fail, but they need to they just need to make up these 4 competencies. They don't need to start at the beginning and take the whole class over again. Now, Lori Rothaus may explain to me how I'm all wrong about this, but that is my understanding, that you can go back and say, okay, you don't have to take this whole class over again. Let's make sure you meet competency in this, this, and this, and then we can pass. Then you can pass. And that is how we work with students so that they can graduate from high school. We don't just say, well, sorry you failed algebra, back to the starting block. No, we come alongside them and say, okay, here are the competencies you made, here are the competencies you did not make, and we work with them through our Pathways to Graduation program to help them make up the competencies so that they can say, okay, I have finished algebra, and now, maybe that class is the one thing that was standing between me and graduation, and now I can graduate. So I will say along these lines, I'm not an expert in that. I would be listening to our teachers who are the experts in that, to our administrators, Amy Doyle. I would listen to people like Lori Rothaus, Lori Peters, who have tons more experience in that. And then, that I gather the information, make the best decision I can in the moment.
Thank you. There's great concern about the number of students who drop out of Merrimack High School. How would you approach lowering the number of students who are dropping out, and what interventions would you support? We'll start with Ms. Hardy.
So I agree with something that Heather Robitaille said earlier, which is this starts early. MTSS is a buzzword or buzz acronym, I guess, that we use, and it means multi-tiered systems of support. And it means that we have supports that are tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 is everybody gets them. That means everybody in the school gets them. This could be the school counselor coming in to do lessons. This could be, academic win time. It could be anything, but it's something everything gets. Tier 2, the next level. Next level, that could be kids who need support. They're not on an IEP, but they need, Title I, or they need reading, and I'm using just reading. It could be for anything. It could be for behavior or whatever. If we can get kids the support they need young and get them enjoying school, that is our first win. We all know, though, that tends to go off the rails in middle and high school. For a lot of kids, it gets a lot harder because social stuff creeps in. At Merrimack High School, I think what we're doing with the Pathways to Graduation and our adult education program are two huge wins for providing other pathways for students to earn credit. And then the last thing I'll say is, I know that we are in the process of improving our guidance department at Merrimack High School, and to me, that is a priority I would like to see at the top of the list over the next few years.
Thank you, Lori Peters.
I want to echo what Jenna said about the guidance department. I think it is an area where students are really feeling like they're unsure about what classes they're needing to take, and we've seen some instances where students were getting caught off guard their senior year. And so we really want to solidify that guidance department, make it robust to support students. I am very proud of our alternative pathways to graduation. Incorporating ELOs is a way to give every student an opportunity to graduate and graduate well. But more than that, it's an opportunity for students to learn in the things that will make them productive citizens. And I think shoring that up, expanding those programs, and communicating that more will really help students who are on that bubble. Also, as I said earlier, those dual credit opportunities I think are really critical. Working with NHTI, MCC, NCC to have dual credit opportunities so students can work under a new paradigm, doing something different, something that they're interested in that will get them graduated. Early intervention is a must. We've invested heavily in those early interventions, and we need to continue to do so. But sometimes, even in those high school years, you can have kids who are still falling off the radar, and we don't want that to happen. We want to give every opportunity for those students.
Thank you, Heather Robitaille.
So I touched on it before. I think that this is not a simple fix, but it is something that we can take specific and measurable action to improve. I believe that we need to continue to build on literacy focus and early intervention. I personally would like to see the proposed reading interventionist that was asked from administration in the original school budget, but cut by the administration and board afterwards. I would like to see that role reinstated. We're all saying that early intervention is really important, and those students who are at the upper elementary school and going to the upper elementary school didn't get to benefit from all of the phonics that happened and the curriculum improvements. So I would like to see that continue, as well as continue to review our curriculum, ensuring that it is aligning with state standards and develop students to be future ready. We know when they graduate that some will go into trades, some into college, career, or service in our military. Another aspect, I think, is supporting and planning enrichment offered to gifted and talented students at all grade levels, as well as a way to stretch those students that are performing above average in areas but may not be identified officially already as gifted and talented, but that is part of making sure that every student achieves their educational potential, and that is the beauty and the complexity of public education. I think dual credit opportunities are fantastic, and I support them, but we've heard from our students that they want more enrichment than that, and I would definitely support that. I also believe that having that student support, so as was mentioned with the guidance department, but even more formal things like mentorships. If that student feels like they have a connection and someone in their corner, they will be more engaged, more likely to succeed, and as they are able to be more successful, with that increased engagement, we'll see decrease in behaviors that detract from that. So I think we catch students early, and we work with them, and we break down barriers for graduation.
Thank you.
Merrimack taxpayers have expressed concerns over the school budget this year. How would you balance the taxpayers' concerns versus the needs of the school district? Starting with Lori Peters.
One of the things that I have said publicly at the school board meetings the last 2 years was that I wanted to see a level funded budget as much as possible. We know that in areas such as fuel, electricity, and other areas where inflation has been anywhere between 4 and 9%, that we couldn't level fund those items, but other items could be level funded. And administration, for the most part, brought us budgets that in the discretionary spending, which makes up less than 20% of the budget, it was level funded. We had to make a change for our teachers. They were underpaid, and we could not compete with districts around us. That created an increase in the budget. The MESA contract, the same thing. We had custodian positions open for $11 an hour. We cannot compete with Dunkin's and Chick-fil-A with $11 salaries. That is an increase to the budget. I want to keep our budget below inflation. Inflation this year has been between 3% and 4%. This year's budget was 2.8%. Last year's inflation was 9%, and we have an increase of 1.4% in the budget. I think balancing what we can in our discretionary spending, as well as understanding that we have all the right people on the right seats on the bus, will help with our personnel expenditures. Keeping an eye on our insurance rates as well will help that. And maintaining our facilities. To maintain them prevents large expenditures for repairs. Lastly, and this is one of the things we have had an increase in the last 2 years, is pursuing grants. We've had a number of grants for safety and facilities. We also can pursue grants for other opportunities such as after-school clubs and other pieces in our educational system, and teachers have been awesome about that. Administrators have been awesome about pursuing those grants, and we need to continue that because it offsets programs in our budget without detracting from those programs.
Thank you. Heather Robitaille.
So I agree that it's important as far as balancing our budget with concerns of taxpayers, but we need to also make sure we're meeting the needs of the students in our district. So we do have the MESA contract that is going to be on our ballot on April 9th. And for anyone who has been in the schools or has a child in the schools, you know that those people are the heart and soul of our schools, and we would not be able to run without them. So that does increase the budget. I would support trying to focus on areas that don't negatively impact student curriculum or programs or support. And I think there are a number of roles that I would like to look at and that don't have direct instructional hours, just to see, is there an opportunity to consolidate potentially? I think when changes have to be made and if cuts to staff or curriculum need to be done, and at times that they do as our population changes and things happen, I think we need to make sure that we plan ahead of time to have steps in place to fill any gaps that might be left. I appreciate the students who came to speak at the budget committee and school board meetings for their experiences that they've had in the various programs here. So I hope and encourage that dialogue to continue.
Thank you. Jenna Hardy.
So I echo, I mean, Lori and I are on the board together, and I would echo everything that Lori had said completely. Certainly many of the things Heather said as well. Yeah, our budget this year is year 2 of the teacher contract. That teacher contract was critical to retaining and attracting highly qualified and experienced teachers. I appreciate that the town voted for that. They've always done that. They've always gotten behind teachers and support staff. This year, please vote yes on Article 4 to give our support staff the raises that they earn them every day in spades, and they are all the teachers and the support staff are the backbones of our district. And so to give them raises, yes, it does increase our budget, but it is something that we have to do to stay competitive as a district. This year's budget also has year 2 of our technology infrastructure program, which helps with our transition to one-to-one devices, which is something that keeps us current. In the year 2024, districts are one-to-one, and that is an expense. Again, thank you to the voters who voted yes on that last year, because that is part of why things, increase. We have to budget every year for our guaranteed maximum rate for our benefits, which is a really boring thing, to talk about, unfortunately, not to teachers, because it's their benefits, which is really important, but we have to budget for the maximum rate that they could come to. So we have to budget for it, which is like 15.9%, I think, off the top of my head this year, but it could come in at 11, which oftentimes people talk about this surplus. It's because sometimes the guaranteed maximum rate is less than what we budget for, so we end up with a surplus that is a result of that discrepancy. And this year the board asked the administration to find a way to cut $1 million because we knew that we couldn't take that money, that amount to the taxpayers, and that the impact was going to be too much, we felt. And so I'll tell you, man, that was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and maybe ever, was to cut positions and to cut things like that because it was hard. It's hard to look at people and say that matters to you, but that has to be cut, and the reason and present the reasons why that couldn't be defended. So we've done some hard things as a board to try to keep those costs low and try to make sure that we are bringing a budget that will increase the quality of education in Merrimack while keeping the taxpayers' budgets in mind.
Thank you. What are the current issues in special education and how would you solve them? Starting with Jenna Hardy.
Pretty good. Well, I think the issue in special education is finding highly qualified staff. There are so many staff shortages in this area, and it's hard to find highly qualified, highly experienced staff. A really cool experience I had lately, though, I think Merrimack's doing a really good job with this. I have a child that's on an IEP, and I brought that IEP to a special educator in my building where I work. And just 'cause I had a question, and she said, "Can I read this?" And she said, "This is the best IEP I've ever seen written." So I'm very proud of the team that we have here in Merrimack because I think that they do a very, very thorough job. Current issues in special education, it really is to me about meeting each child's needs, about listening to parents as advocates for their own children because they know them very well. We need to listen to them. We need to really make sure we are making our goals appropriate for each student and doing the best we can to meet each student's individual needs where they are at so that they can make educational progress every year. And as a special education student as a parent of a special education student in Merrimack, I have been very pleased. There have been challenges, but I have been very pleased with the programs and the staff and what we've been provided.
Thank you, Lori Peters.
I think one of the challenges we have is the learning loss from COVID, and we have students who are qualifying now for services that wouldn't have had we not had COVID. We need to meet their needs and make sure that they are meeting their goals, just as Jenna said. It is a reality that we need to accept. That is why we have hired interventionists to help those students who may be on the cusp, maybe not need those IEP services, because they just need some intervention and support early and often. And so I support continuing that. I also support the expansion of our summer programs. That expansion post-COVID has helped more and more students that in our SPED program, but also who are on that edge, get the support that they need for the summer. My daughter is a special ed director in her building in Virginia. One of the things that she has said is the most difficult thing for them is, because of the shortages, time. She works endless hours outside of her contract hours to write IEPs, to communicate with parents. And that is something that's not attractive for a lot of people looking for a job, to be expected to work 20 unpaid hours outside their contract hours. Finding qualified staff who are good at what they do is hard. And that shortage, even in our own district, our shortage of paras in our district, make all of those services more difficult to provide. And so one of the things we have challenged our Director of Student Services to do is an audit of all of our IEPs and 504s to ensure that we are staffed appropriately, that they are written appropriately, and that the goals are appropriate for each individual student so that we make sure we are providing the best special education services in the state here in Merrimack.
Thank you, Jenna Hardy. Heather Robitaille.
Hi. So I think first and foremost, we have to ensure that all of our students are receiving a fair and a free, appropriate public education. We know that using early identification and intervention is critical. So I agree that there are probably a number of students right now that had some learning loss, or students that are on the edge of whether they truly need special education or they just need to be caught up a bit and then they'll be able to move forward. I would like us to look at all students that are on IEPs and 504 plans to make sure that they have the supports in place to help them access their education. No student should ever fall through the cracks, regardless of the level of support they need. Some students may appear to need less support, but that support is still critical, and we should not fail them as a result of that. I would also like to look at the staffing and contractors. As you heard, personnel is a huge component of this. The support staff that works with these students is really critical, and when we have to contract out, you don't get the same kind of bond and relationship that builds and make that progress. So I would like to look at that, as well as what can we do better as a district to reduce the number of students that have to be placed out of district. So when I met with Sarah Reinhardt for the budget committee, that was something that she said that they were trying to look at. When a student is placed out of district, I would like to see a process of how do we really assess what Merrimack is offering. Is this something that we could scale because there are probably more students who need some of those services or interventions? Or is this a one-off case that really the best thing is for that student to be placed out of district to get the help that they need? I'd also like to make sure that all laws and timeframes are met by staff so that families don't have to fight to get data, communication, or have deadlines met.
Thank you. We have now come to our closing statements, and we will start with School Board Member Lori Peters.
So once again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come tonight. I would like to say that the school board that I've been on for the last 3 years, we do not always agree, but we do come together. Building bridges across different stakeholders has been a goal of mine since day one. And I can say that as a community, as a board, as a district, I feel like I have built those bridges, and I would like to continue to do so. I support the Merrimack School District, and I support our teachers, our staff, our students, and family. I want to see Merrimack thrive. I want to see our students thrive, our families thrive, and I would like to see us thrive as a town. And I believe if I continue on the school board, I will be able to continue to pursue the goals we've begun and do even better.
Thank you so much. Next, School District Budget Committee Member Heather Robitaille.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Matthew and Cadence and Nathan, for putting this event together again. Thanks for your engagement and your activity in our community. I'm running for school board because I want to be a voice for our schools and for our community. I would welcome the opportunity to be a member of this team and to share my own unique perspectives and input. I have a proven track record of community involvement and dedication to our schools and to our children. So I hope that I can earn your vote on April 9th so that I can bring those experiences to the Merrimack School Board and ensure that all students can achieve their highest educational potential and graduate ready for their future, whatever that may bring them.
Thank you. And lastly, School Board Member Jenna Hardy.
Well, I also want to thank you. This was fun. I enjoyed this. I enjoyed listening to my fellow candidates, so thank you. And thank you for everybody who came. I have really enjoyed being on the board for the last 3 years. I started this because I believe in the Merrimack School District, which is why I've raised my kids here, which is why they go to school here. And I feel like my knowledge from my multitude of years with 4 kids in all the different buildings in this district brought to it, I was able to bring a perspective that just had a little foot in everywhere. It seems like my kids have introduced me to every nook and cranny of this district, which is something that I love. During my tenure on the board, we've hired new, excellent, and experienced administration. We've transformed literacy instruction from K to 6. We voted to support 2 teacher contracts and a support staff contract that we hope that the town will vote for this April. We hired a director of pathways to graduations and started an adult education program. Throughout this time, I've been student-focused in my decision-making. I've listened to perspectives. Several people who I know didn't agree with me when I ran last time still reach out to me, and they always say they appreciate that I'm willing to have a dialogue. I've pushed for teachers and support staff to be compensated well. I've not been afraid to make difficult decisions. And I'm very proud of the work myself and my fellow board members have done, because when I ran the first time, I kept saying, it feels like Merrimack schools are stuck in 1975. And you know what? I don't feel like that anymore. I feel like we are moving in the right direction, finally. And I think there's more work to be done, and I want to be part of it. So I would ask for your vote on April 9th.
Thank you. Thank you to all our candidates and community members who came out for tonight's debate. I'm so honored to be able to work with such a great group of students. Once again, Nathan and Cadence, and then our vice chair, Katie Legay, who was unable to attend tonight. So thank you, and make sure to stop by on April 3rd for our town council debate and vote on April 9th.